Listen on demand. Go to mynorthwest.com and click podcasts. KIRO Radio 97.3 FM. News and talk. Powered by the Pacific Northwest.
The Big Lead is brought to you by 3010 Weight Loss for Life.
The Dori Monson Show on KIRO Radio. This is The Big Lead.
Coming to you from the Carter Silvero studio. Welcome. Welcome to the big show. We're also streaming on Facebook Live. Glad you can be with us as we roll into a Tuesday. Dave Wyman will come by for his weekly visit. 1:30 this afternoon, we'll talk Seahawks and lots of other stuff with Dave. Also at 12:30, I'm going to have an update on that Capitol Hill restaurant that sent out, in a world of vile tweets, the owner of this Capitol Hill restaurant sent out the single most disgusting tweet I've ever seen. And I really mean this. Celebrating the death of a 9-year-old girl in South Carolina. I know we talked about this yesterday. Jason Rantz broke the story with Jason on the show yesterday. But as I was thinking about today's show last night, and I was thinking about the utter depravity and lack of humanity, still no apology from the woman who sent out a tweet about a 9-year-old girl being accidentally shot to death. I mean, it's absolutely disgusting. And I will have a follow-up on that story coming up at 12:30 this afternoon, right after the bottom of the hour news. But let's get right to The Big Lead.
The Big Lead, Dori Monson Show exclusive.
Are you incapable as a parent of parenting your kids? Are you just utterly incapable of communicating with them, of loving them, of helping guide them through life's major decisions? Because I'm guessing if you listen to this show, you're probably a pretty good, capable parent. Just a guess. I know my listeners pretty well. But elsewhere in this state, and this has been driven by the Seattle, King County radical control of our state legislature. With this new year, a new law has kicked into place that I want to make sure you know about, because this is just an extension of the effort by the radical left to take away your children. And I mean this quite literally. They have already used the public schools as indoctrination medium, where kids are just taught one way of thinking, and if they dare stray, they will be ostracized, they will be shamed, they'll be bullied, not just by fellow students, they'll be bullied by teachers if they don't think the right way, and they hope to just pound every kid into submission. If you control children's minds, you control society, right? So that's what the public schools have all too often become about. But this Senate bill that just kicked into place on January 1st, I just want to make sure you know about it. One of my listeners sent this to me from Regents Blue Shield. But it's all insurance companies, all healthcare providers that have to abide by Senate Bill 5889 here in Washington, because it went into place January 1st. And what it says is, if your children are 13 or older, they can withhold medical information from you, the parent. And they say, what is a sensitive condition? Sexually transmitted diseases, substance use disorder, reproductive health, mental health, gender dysphoria, gender-affirming care, domestic violence. And then they say that parents will not be notified unless the child explicitly gives the information, gives the healthcare provider permission to share the information with the parents. And I want you to think just about how significant this is. If you have a 13-year-old who is going through some kind of gender dysphoria issue, there is a cult, and I do mean it is a cult in our state, that is rushing to get kids to do hormonal treatment that will alter their bodies for the rest of their lives. And if adults want to make that decision, they should be free to do so. But we don't let 13-year-olds smoke because they don't have judgment about cigarettes. We don't let 13-year-olds drink alcohol because they don't have the judgment to make that decision. But we will let 13-year-old children decide to take prescription pharmaceuticals that will alter their body chemistry for the rest of their lives. And as I said, there is no balanced, unbiased healthcare treatment. It is a cult to get kids to switch genders. My question is, do you think parents should be involved in that decision? Do you think it is good and right that the state of Washington has completely cut you out of that as a parent? Because a listener who sent this to me included, and I'm not going to go into the heartbreaking details of their family story, but you should be horrified that government has decided to take away parents' power to just communicate with their kids about forever life-changing decisions. They said that if you're a parent and you have a question, they said, can you give an example? This is on the Regents Blue Shield website. Can you give an example of this situation? And they say, let's say you're a parent who calls customer service and you have a question about your 14-year-old child's medication for anxiety. Starting January 1st, you will not be able to receive any information unless your child has authorized our customer service professionals to share it. Anxiety is a sensitive condition because it falls under mental health care. I'd really like to hear from you. You can text me at 98973. That's 98973. But it is yet another dramatic, not step, but lurching toward government taking control of our children and cutting parents out because the Washington State Senate, these radicals who have taken over the state legislature, they think that they know how to handle your kid's life better than you do as a parent. But they know that they don't because you and I and they, I mean, everybody knows. They don't care. They couldn't care less about your child. They just want to make sure that they do everything they can for the causes in which they believe. And if some lives get destroyed in the process, well, so be it. It's only one kid's life. What does that matter? What do you think about this new law that has just gone into place in Washington? I'm going to share some of your responses a little bit later this afternoon. Text me at 98973. That's 98973. Up next in the Big Lead.
The Big Lead. I told you so.
The Seattle Times has a story. For the first time in decades, Seattle now has as many renters as homeowners. Why is this a big deal? How could Monson possibly rant about this one? Well, I have been telling you for years now that this is the trend line, and it's for very specific reasons. That we've been destroying much of the fabric of this city by tearing down and upzoning, tearing down single-family houses and upzoning, taking these beautiful classic houses with yards and allowing developers who are connected to City Hall, who know which palms to grease, and they can tear down the houses, build a high-rise, and we take away personal property rights. Because if you're a renter, you don't own the property. And there's nothing more fundamental to a free society than private property rights. It is an absolute bedrock essential of a free society. The other thing about this is for renters, they do not see property tax bills. Now, they get baked into their monthly rent, but the monthly rent, it's a competitive marketplace, and the landlords have to make sure that they don't greatly overprice their properties. And so if you're a renter, you are much more likely to vote for property tax increases than a property owner would. And so this is why, for years and years now, Seattle has been steering toward this model. And that is, let's eliminate single-family homes. Let's try to get everybody into these communal space apartments. Get rid of private property owners as much as possible so that we will have more people who are likely to vote for tax increases. And I've told you this. I've gone to Europe many times, and I enjoy the history of Europe. But when I walk around, and a few times we have tried to encamp in a city for, a week or so, like Paris, down the south of France, some of those coastal cities. And I find those cities to be, while I'm glad I went, I'm glad that I've seen the history, I'm glad that I've experienced that part of the world, I, for the most part, find European cities to be unbelievably depressing. No single-family homes in the city. If you want to get outside, you got to be in some communal space surrounded by a bunch of other people. And it's all about collectivity instead of individualism. And I find that depressing. You may have noticed over the years, if you listen to the show, I'm not big into collectivism. Because, again, according to our demographic studies, like most of my listeners, I'm a pretty fierce individualist. And I'm good at running my own life. And I like having some solitude once in a while. I like having a yard. I like mowing my yard. I enjoy that so much. I got to get a new rider mower, I think, finally. That's another subject. I don't want to go off on a tangent. But I find European cities to be very depressing. Now, here in the Puget Sound area, and we're seeing some of this happening in Tacoma, Everett as well, that is the dream of politicians, because most European cities are socialism to some extent. And that is the dream for our future. And so when you see that Seattle has as many renters as homeowners for the first time in many, many, many decades, this is being designed. It's part of, we got to take control of your kids. We got to make sure that we don't give you any personal private property rights. We're just going for collectivism. Which brings me to the next point in my big lead.
The big lead. Your tax dollars at work.
America's sweetheart is what she's known as. Seattle City Councilwoman Kshama Sawant. She has announced that she is going to create a big new tax on business. She's bringing back the Amazon head tax. And that's because,
No, Jeff Bezos is our enemy.
Yeah, they got to tax that Jeff Bezos creep. What's he done? All he does is create jobs and provide good incomes for most of his workers in Seattle. I know, I've heard about the conditions in the warehouses. But I'm talking about in Seattle, a lot of six-figure jobs there. Creates good jobs, provides lots of tax revenues, all of that. But it's not enough. He is the enemy. And so Sawant says it is time to launch another head tax effort.
And to tax big businesses and the rich instead of ordinary working people.
And, of course, a couple of years ago, they tried doing this with disastrous consequences when she tried speaking downtown to construction workers.
No head tax! No head tax!
Brothers, the only people you're empowering is Amazon and the bosses. I invite one of you to speak here.
Tax! No head tax! No head tax! No head tax! No head tax!
one of my brothers like to come and speak here, rather than drowning us out, can we hear each other out? Please come and speak.
I think I've seen you guys drown people out before, so I'm going to repeat.
No, we haven't drowned anyone
No
out.
head tax! No head tax! No head tax! No head tax!
That is
No
still
head tax!
one of my
No
all-time
head tax!
favorite Seattle sound bites right there. So what is she going to do with all of this money? She says that she wants to tax big business and build public housing. Now, and as I've said, she is not about solving any problems. And frankly, really not smart enough to solve any problems. She can barely run her own life. I'll be damned if she'll run mine. But Kshab Sawant, she apparently has seen that Chicago, after decades of absolute disastrous public housing, had to raise the public housing that they built back in the 60s. I'll tell you what, the more government has gotten involved in trying to end poverty, the worse poverty gets in the big government cities. New York City, their public housing high-rise has been a disaster. But Sawant says she wants to tax Amazon to build social housing. And she says she wants to allow people who are without rules. You can be drinking alcohol, you can be using drugs, and they want to provide you with an apartment that Amazon and other business owners would have to pay for. Now, again, what's the motivation behind that? Well, it is they want to take people who are drug vagrants and they want to make them captive voters. That's all this is about. It is not about helping those individuals. It's not about saving their lives. It's not about turning their lives around and giving them some sovereignty over their life. It's about putting them in one place so that Sawant's campaign workers can go and leaflet conveniently and out of the elements when they say, hey, we need you to vote for this new tax. Seattle tax revenues on a per capita basis, the highest in the country. They have plenty of money. They just don't know how to spend it because we have idiots in charge. And they say, now we need more money so that we can help these lives. It's not about helping anyone's life. It's about having captive voters in one place who can be easily controlled and manipulated. Period. That's all this is about. And that is your big lead for today.
The Big Lead on KIRO Radio.
Ursula's going to check the news, and then I'm going to have an update on the Capitol Hill restaurant, whose owner sent the single most vile tweet I have ever seen in my life, celebrating the shooting death of a 9-year-old girl in South Carolina. Details straight ahead here on the Dori Monson Show.